Hey, howdy, hey, friends and neighbors. Scott here, and I've tried to record this video maybe 8 times already, and I keep getting interrupted. Here comes another interruption, but I like this interruption. Hey, buddy.
Daddy,
Yeah.
you make those potatoes walk.
I can't right now. I'm doing a video. I'll have to do it after. We may be going to bed after, okay? Okay. Hey, interruptions. So, well, we're just going to go on through this time because this has got to get recorded. Record it before I fall asleep. So, today what I want to talk about is extreme herb frugality. And when I say extreme herb frugality, I'm talking about getting every last little drop of medicinal value, medicinal power from your herbs for your herbal medicine. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about would be applicable just to everybody that doesn't want to waste money and waste herbs. But some of these things would be more for a really dire situation. Some of these things would not be what you would call best practices in herbal medicine, and I'll try to be really clear when those are, where you would get a diminishing return. But if you're snowed in and you can't go out and get new herbs, and it's winter and they're not growing, or if it's a zombie apocalypse and you can't order herbs off of Amazon or a mountain rose herb, or if you're just really strapped for cash and you just can't buy new herbs and you got to make what you have last, and then it might be worth trying some of these out. You can use your own judgment as we go through. Okay, let's just go ahead and dive in before we have a power out or who knows what. Okay, so some general tips. First, the more you use heat, the weaker the medicine will be. That's a pretty good general truth. Some things are more resistant to heat than others, and some are more vulnerable, but as a general rule, you want to use only as much heat as is necessary because it really bangs up the herbs, the medicine of the herbs. Also, smaller, more frequent doses are going to be a lot better, a lot more effective for you than just trying to take a bunch of the herb and spread it out really far apart. I'm really bad about that when I make my medicinal teas, especially the nourishing herbal infusions. I'm a gulper, and I end up trying to just drink that all at once in the morning, because who has time to be sipping that thing all day? I got to drink this and then get going and get my stuff done, and it's really not nearly as effective because it goes through all at once, and good luck, digestive system. I hope you can get it all in one quick go, because that's a liquid that's going to go through in a hurry. And I only have a semicolon too. That's kind of my favorite body/grammar joke, that I have a part of my colon is going to have a semicolon. But yeah, when you say teas, for example, when you just sip it throughout the day, you constantly refresh it in your body, and it's always in your bloodstream, that whatever the constituent is you're pulling out. So it's a lot better for you than just one big mega dose in the morning, or one in the morning and one at night, even if it was the same total amount of the herb. The pharmaceutical companies, I'm not doing a rip on them, not for this, but they work really hard to make sure that their drugs can be taken as infrequently as possible, because they know that it's human nature not to do that. Not to just here's this pill, take it 15 times a day. It would be more effective that way, but humans are humans, and we tend to not want to. But if you want to make the most use out of your herbs, use them very frequently in much smaller doses. And then also, your herbs won't force you to be healthy. If you're getting 4 hours of sleep a night and you're constantly, grinding at this really stressful job and you never stop, and you're just feeding yourself a bunch of junk, it doesn't matter what herbs you're taking. You're not going to be healthy. You're not going to feel good, and you're probably not going to be happy. So, it's called holistic medicine, on purpose. You want to look at that whole person, the whole life, and not approach herbs like you would a pharmaceutical drug, and think, oh, my back hurts, I'll just take an herb for that, and then I can continue to hunch over and keep hurting my back, he said as he hunched over with his poor posture. All right, let's get into the first one. Powders. Now, powders aren't an application all on their own. They're what you would make applications out of. But hey guy, what's up? Hey, let's not bump the table, okay?
Can I watch this show?
Yeah, that's a Star Trek. You bet you can watch Star Trek. That's my boy right there. Right, powders. Um, so powders are an application all by themselves, but they're really worth talking about because we can try to make this more efficient. For one thing, powders are super convenient, but they have a shorter shelf life. The ground up herb, it won't last quite as long as, say, big chunks of the herb most of the time, because when you grind them up into small pieces, you have really increased the surface area of that herb that now can interact with the air, and it can oxidize as the oxygen reacts to it. Guy, Daddy's doing a video, okay? Yes, but you're gonna have to leave the dining room so Daddy can do his video. Okay. I don't mind that kind of interruption, but I have had a bunch of interruptions today. Okay, sorry. So some other things besides store it in an airtight container. That will help keep it from oxidizing. If you have oxygen absorbers, you can throw those in there. It's a bit of a luxury item in a zombie apocalypse, granted, but I mean, what else are you going to use it for? You're going to kill some zombies with some oxygen absorbers, and if you do, let me know how that works too. You want to store your powders away from light, away from heat. If you can put them in a cool, dark location, like in a counter, in a cabinet, or in your pantry or something, that's pretty ideal. If you refrigerate them, that'll make them last longer if you have the space for it. If you freeze them, that'll make them last a lot longer. You can you can freeze powders. You really want to make sure that they don't get any moisture in there. Whether they're frozen or not, you don't want moisture. But sometimes when you freeze things, that you can get freezer burn, or a little moisture gets into the freezer and it can get in. If you store it in a glass jar, that'll really help, especially if they are a very aromatic herb. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, the aromatic herbs are using the volatile oils or essential oils as their medically active compounds, and those are tiny little molecules. It's kind of silly to hold my fingers together and pretend like I'm showing the size of a molecule, because I couldn't show you the size of a very big molecule like that. But they really are very tiny, and they're so small that they evaporate readily. And so if you left the container open, they would lose their medicinal value in like a few days or maybe a few weeks. If you store them even in a plastic container, like a Ziploc container, they're so small that they can float through the plastic container. Not as easily as they could just out in open air, but they can work their way out. So if you have something like chamomile, like in this picture, definitely for your long-term storage, you want to store that in a airtight container. Okay. I think that's everything here. Keep it all dry. Okay, the next application that we'll talk about are infusions, which are basically teas. And teas don't have the best shelf life. We usually say they're good for a day outside of refrigeration, or about 3 days refrigerated. People don't normally talk about freezing them, but you can do that. You can pour them into ice cube trays and freeze teas. And I'm sure there are exceptions, although I can't think of any that don't store that well. Maybe I don't think I've tried to freeze any of the real mucilaginous. Well, yeah, I have. Yeah, I've frozen mucilaginous herbs, the demulcent herbs. They freeze fine. I'll do comfrey poultices, and they're plenty fine frozen. So, yeah, go ahead and freeze them. Put them in ice cube trays, and then they'll last months. You can pull them out as you need them. And the most potent herbs, if you use something fresh, that is, just pluck it right off of the vine or the tree, and that's when it's most active. Although if you dry it, then it's usually more concentrated because the water content is gone. But then every moment after that, it's getting slightly less potent. But if you freeze something, you kind of lock it in, So, well, take that for what you will. You can freeze these. When you make a tea, you don't want to boil the plant in the water. Rather, boil the water separately and then pour that into a cup, over the tea. And then you want to cover that up, because oftentimes some of the medicinal components will be more prone to evaporation than just the water, and they will evaporate out in that hot water. So you cover it up, and you let it condense back on the top of the plate and drip back down. And whenever it's cool enough to drink, make sure that you let those little drippy drops go back in there, because that's the good stuff. This next tip really depends on your tolerance for texture. Usually it doesn't bother me too bad. I'll drink the tea regular fine, and then when I get to the very end, to the gritty stuff, I'll just kind of man up and knock that back and drink it. And maybe chase it with a little bit of water and swish my mouth out. But yeah, don't use a tea bag. Just put the tea in there and drink the herb powder, the grit with it. It's not as pleasant, but it won't kill you. Oh man. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all the tips for here. All right. A nourishing herbal infusion is very much like a tea, but you use a bunch more of the plant material, like a lot more. You put your plants in, say like a big mason jar, boil your water, pour the water over it, and then close it up, shake it up, and let it sit on your counter overnight. And it does a really good job of breaking down the cell walls and pulling out the nutrients, especially the minerals, because minerals can be kind of hard to pull out of a plant, and doing it this way is one of the, in my view, it's one of the better ways of extracting minerals. So nourishing herbal infusions are often used for your nourishing herbs, your food type herbs. Because of the quantity of herbs involved, you usually don't do these with the more what you might call them pharmacologically active herbs, the more drug-like herbs. You use them more with the food-like herbs. But still, shelf life is a problem, so you can definitely refrigerate it to make it last longer, and you can freeze it, as the other ones. But with the plant material that's left in the bottom, normally you would pour the liquid off. You would get your plants and squeeze them and strain all the liquid out. And they're pretty well spent at that point. But there's still going to be a little bit of medicinal value in the herbs, or nutritional value in the herbs. It's not going to be near as much as it used to be, but if we're being extremely frugal, there's zombies outside and we can't go, collect more of these, you might want to see if there's a way that you can reuse those. Can you use them as a poultice, depending on what they are? If they were a mucilaginous herb, I would still use that as a poultice. Now, it wouldn't be my first choice if I had fresh herbs, but if there were zombies outside and I had to make my herbs last, sure. If I had used some marshmallow and I was draining the plant material out and I had a rash on my leg, yeah, sure, I'd pull it out and slap it on there. It's not going to hurt anything, and it should still have that demulcent slime on it. If it was some kind of serious infection, I probably wouldn't try to reuse them, because a lot of their medicinal power is going to be used up, and I really don't think you want to fool around with trying to take care of like a staph infection or a mysterious and dangerous looking spider bite or something. I would use fresh herbs for that. But if it's something not too serious, you can use it as a poultice. You could try your luck at eating them if they're an edible herb. I wouldn't try eating, say, oat straw. It's even after that, that's going to be rough, man. That's going to be rough. But if you were making one of these with the nettles or clovers, well, you could use that cook that back in toss them in a stew, or put them in some other dish. Maybe dry them, powder them, and add them to a bread. It might be a good way to get it would add some more bulk to the bread, if nothing else, and a bit more of the nutrients, because there's still some in there. And it just gives your body one more chance to extract that last bit of nutrients. Just like with the teas, the hot water doesn't pull 100% of the medicinal properties out. So why not go ahead and swallow it and give your body another shot at it? Okay, would you use these for tinctures? I would say no, because one of the main things about tinctures is how concentrated they are, and you're just not going to have enough medicinal potency in these secondhand herbs to get that kind of concentration. Plus, they're going to be wet, and that's going to dilute your alcohol. It might cause the whole thing to spoil and then that hasn't been frugal. That's been a waste. So a decoction is it's when you boil an herb. It's a lot like an infusion, like a tea, but instead of pouring the, gosh, can you see how tired I am? I can't even say things. Instead of pouring boiling water over the herbs, you just simmer the herb there, right, in the water, and you do this with tougher, sturdier things like roots and bark and stems, because just fixing them like a tea, it just wouldn't be enough heat to extract it. But remember, more heat does mean less medicine, because it does rough it up even in this case. So, what you could do to, oh, hi. Yes. Don't shake the table, baby. No, I'm not going to turn that on right now. You get scared when you watch that one. You don't get scared in the daytime when we watch it, but it's nighttime now. And you get scared if we turn it on at night. Go and play a game for a while I record this. Love you, bud. He's a good boy. He needs his daddy right now. So let's keep going. Right. So decoctions. I would recommend not doing a decoction if you are trying to be really, really herb frugal. Rather, I would say find a way to grind up that root or stem into a powder. If you have a really good blender, you can do it. Or if you have a couple of rocks and a lot of patience, you can do it. And that way you're going to get all that surface area. And a lot of the time, if you do that, then a standard infusion will be enough to pull the medicinal, properties out. Or if you are using just a chunk of root, like in this picture, this is licorice root. If you were using a piece like that in the image, could you use that material twice for two different decoctions? Technically, yes. Now the second one's not going to be as potent. I mean, let's not lie, but you could. It would depend on the size of the root piece and how long you simmered it. But you're probably not going to pull it all out in the first one, especially if afterwards. Now you'd want to let it dry. You don't want to let it sit and mold, but dry it out thoroughly. If you then cut it into some smaller pieces, to give the water access to new places it hasn't touched as much, yeah, you could use it a second time. It's going to be secondhand herbs, but it would still have some in there. Next are tinctures. Tinctures are alcohol-based extracts. You can use other things like glycerin to make a glycerite, but in this type of scenario, I would advise only using actual alcohol tinctures, because the shelf life is phenomenal. If they're stored correctly, they'll last you like at least 10 years, probably a lot longer than that. So that's another reason. They're really good because they're very concentrated. You'll find some recommendations for just like 1 to 3 drops. Most of the time, I feel like that's not enough, but it could depend on tincturing technique, and it definitely could depend on the plant you're using. If you were messing around with Phytolacca, the pokeweed, then yeah, keep your dose real low. But if it was something like a milky oats tincture, I think a little more is, well, I'll say this: when I use a tincture, I don't measure it in drops. I measure it in like dropperfuls or squeezes of the little bulb on the dropper. Right. One thing you can do is don't strain out the herbs. So when you make your tincture, you put your herbs in a jar, pour the alcohol over it, put a lid on it, shake it up, say nice things to it. Come back and check it every day and shake it up and say more nice things to it. And people like to leave it for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever you think is good for you. And then they'll open the lid, they'll strain out all the plants, and they'll chuck the plants and rebottle the liquid. But there's really no reason to chuck the plants. You don't really have to. You can leave them in there as long as you want. It's not going to spoil. And if anything, it's just going to gradually get a little bit more potent because it has more time, to really soak in there and dry out a little more and a little more. I mean, the longer you leave it, it's going to drop off, how much you're pulling out, but it will get a slightly more potent over time that way. If we were running low and we had the option. Say we're almost out of our tincture, and we have the herbs in there, and we had the option of either just pouring more alcohol back on and trying to re-extract it, or adding a few more fresh herbs in the top and then pouring alcohol on. I would do that one, the latter, the putting some fresh herbs on top, because the herbs are pretty well spent at that point. And one of the main things about a tincture is it's really concentrated. So if it's not all that concentrated because you've already pulled everything out, you're really not doing a whole lot. Sometimes you can get away with that if you're doing a flavor extract rather than a medicinal tincture. It's a little weaker, but you just pour a little more in. But that's not what we want to do. We want to make some good medicine. So really, you're honestly probably better off just getting new herbs every time. But if you're really trying to make them last, and you have enough room in your jar, you can put some fresh stuff in, really squish it down, and then pour more alcohol on it. You're going to have to use your own judgment there and really watch, how your body reacts to it, how strong it is, because it's probably not going to be as strong as the first batch, because you've got a mix of new and old herbs. But it's workable in a situation that would make it necessary. I guess we could say it that way. If you need to use a tincture topically, which would be called a liniment, but it can be the same thing. I like to use a little spray bottle because it helps to disperse it over a large area without a lot of waste. If you're just trying to pour it on and then rub it in, some of it's going to spill off, some of it's going to get on your hand where you didn't need it. But the spray bottle helps it to spray out. And limitations of tinctures. They're really not good for nutrition-based medicine. Some things like oat straw, nettles, clover, then we talked about some of these, we mentioned them briefly. Those are very often used for their nutritional properties. And if that's what you're going for, if you have a low mineral content, so your nerves are all jangly and you're trying to bring that up, making a tincture of those herbs is probably not going to be very effective, because even if it's really great at extracting them, you just can't concentrate that many nutrients into a small area as, just a dropper full. It's just not going to be enough. I mean, if that was 100%, mineral content, it might not even be enough, or it might be too much depending on what minerals it is. Sorry, thinking fuzzy. Hour late. Time, bed. But they're good for the more pharmacological, drug-like effects, not as good for nutritional effects. That may have been confusing when I said milky oats tincture, and then I also talked about milky oats or oat straw not being good for a tincture. The tops, people use the milky oat tops for a tincture, and that does work. But then right on the plant, right below where the oats, they kind of droop down below that, the stalk, the straw. I mean, you can use it as a straw. You can buy oat straw for alternatives to plastic straws. That part doesn't tincture very well, but it does work really well in a infusion to pull out the nutrients. All right. Oh, let's get through this before I completely lose the ability to talk. Essential oils. Okay. I love some essential oils. It's a big, elaborate process, or at least that's my understanding, to make an essential oil. I've never tried to make an essential oil because it looks hard, I guess. You got to have some equipment to really distill it down properly. But these things are great. Now, I'm not going to tell you which company that you need to buy from, because oil loyalty, it runs deep and people can get offended. If you want to know if you want to get involved in my oil cult, I'll make a video about that later. But for right now, just make sure it's a very pure brand, and they can label it 100% pure. And at least in America, in the United States, for legal purposes, that means pretty much nothing. They can say 100% pure essential oil, and legally it has no meaning. It could be motor oil, just about. So you have to learn about the company, but That's a different video. I'm sure somebody can comment on this and say, "Oh, buy only this oil," and the other one's the devil, and this person will say, "No, buy only this oil. The other one is the devil." And that's how oil that's how oil loyalties work. But anyway, these have a phenomenal shelf life too. You store them properly, they're going to last longer than you are. So cool, dark place. This is the typical stuff. Make sure the lid's on good, or they're going to evaporate and be gone, because those essential oils, they do like to evaporate. They can be difficult to dispense over a small area, because say you have a rash on your leg, and you try to put a drop and then you try to rub it over your leg. Well, they absorb really well, and it's only a little bit of oil, and it just goes zoop right into your leg, and you have this kind of vaguely oily sheen, but you can't rub it anymore. So the trick is use a carrier oil, something like coconut oil, olive oil, carrot seed oil, jojoba or jojoba, or however you want to pronounce that. Squirt some of that into a little bowl, put a drop of your oil in there, and stir it up with your finger, and then you can rub it over a large area. Don't worry that it's dilute. That's fine. Essential oils, if you have a good company where it's a very pure essential oil, the molecules are tiny. There is an insane number of molecules in there. I'm going to get this number wrong. It was something like in one drop of essential oil, there were enough molecules for like each cell in your body to get like more than one molecule of essential oil. I may have the proportion a little bit wrong, but it's needless to say, it's a whole bunch, and they're an extraordinarily concentrated form of plant medicine. I forget how many pounds of different plants it takes to make one of these little bitty bottles, so that they're very potent. It's fine to dilute it in that way, and it will still be very effective. They're also one of my favorite ways to use these is through inhalation. Now there's the sort of aromatherapy route, which I think kind of gets poo-pooed by the mainstream medical juggernaut, but I don't think that's fair, because your sense of smell is directly hardwired to your memory. It's connected to the limbic system. It influences what hormones are turned on and turned off. There's really a lot that is connected to your nose. It's a little scary and definitely weird how much your sense of smell affects the rest of your body, but it really does. So the certain scents can really have a very fast and potent effect on your whole body. But for another less spooky effect, a lot of these different oils have strong antimicrobial effects. And when you have a sinus infection or a bronchial or a lung infection, you could take an antibiotic, a pharmaceutical antibiotic, and you swallow it, and it goes to your stomach, and then it has to dissolve, and then it has to be absorbed, and then it spreads through your bloodstream, through your entire body, and then some of the medicine gets to your lungs or your sinuses or your throat, and then it deals with it. Or you can just take the lid off of one of these, breathe it in, and if it's a very strong antimicrobial, then that medicine goes just directly to the infection. It's not the kind of thing you could do one time and be done, because that's not how herbal medicines work for the most part. You would want to breathe it in several times a day for a few minutes each time, because more frequent doses are always better. But yeah, in my own personal opinion, in my own personal experience, I have found that inhalation, if you put your nose right up at the bottle, I've found that to be as or sometimes more effective than a pharmaceutical antibiotic. I'm trying to think if I've phrased that correctly, because I don't want to make a medical statement and get in trouble with the FDA. So I'm trying to say in my own personal experiences that I've had. This statement is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, etc. any disease. See your doctor. Long live the United States government, Food and Drug Administration, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. You can also, some people smoke herbs. That is not a drug reference. That's actual, like mullein. People would smoke mullein leaf for lung issues, because mullein is a very good lung herb. And it really is, but the downside is smoke is not really good for your lungs. But the essential oils, they don't really have that downside. You just breathe them in. I'll tell you one of the downsides, though, is that they evaporate so quickly. If you just have the lid off and you're breathing it in, you're probably losing a lot of the... oh, that guy. You're probably losing a lot of the herb just to the air, the oil to the air. So to make it a little more efficient, you can open it up, drip it onto a cotton ball. Then you can close it up and hold that right by your nose. That way you can keep breathing it for several minutes, and even after most of it is evaporated, there's still going to be some there and you can breathe. Or if you have a mustache, you can drip it right on your mustache and breathe it in. So there's something for the men out there, maybe for a few of the ladies. Sorry. But don't use one of the hot oils like oregano or cinnamon bark, or there's some different blends. But wow, that will light you up. I've done that. I know it will. It feels like a grass fire burning across your upper lip, but it really does open your sinuses up. I mean, your nostrils are like garden hoses, and it comes out. That's only for the brave or the foolish. As far as putting them in a diffuser, you can buy these really nice diffusers that, make a little mist, and it fills the air with a scent. If you're using it for aromatherapy purposes, I think that a diffuser is great. If you're using it for a lung infection, if you're sitting there right by the diffuser and you're going to have it on for several hours, it's probably going to be fairly helpful. But if you're just turning it on in the corner of the room and it's just filling up the air, I don't know that you're breathing in enough of it. That's probably a case-by-case thing. It would probably depend on what oil you were using, how many drops you put in, how big the room is, what type of infection you have. There's probably a lot of variables. But I feel like a lot of the time it's too diffuse at that point to have the same kind of potency. All right, let's keep going because I do need to get some kids to bed. Poultices. I love poultices. They're very useful in this type of hypothetical situation. I don't know if you can hear him on the microphone, but he's going nuts. In this type of hypothetical situation, they're not as efficient in terms of how many herbs you use to make the application. They're not as efficient as a lot of the others. You might, rather than a poultice, try a salve, oil, or a spray. A spray is just an herbal tea that's put into a spray bottle. So if you can make tea, you can make a spray. And you just spray it on several times a day. More is better. Sorry, that's very distracting. And see, he's saying that mommy's home, so my wife is here. So I always get to about here, and then something comes in. I'm going to see if we can power through this. Here's the door. Okay. Salves and oils we're going to talk about in a bit. If you really need to draw and pull something out, that's the strength of a poultice. Is they're really good for when you need to pull out like a venom or a toxin or an infection. That's what they're really, really good for. And if that's what you're dealing with, I would say just go ahead and make the poultice, slap it on. You might be able to get away with a salve, a drawing salve. But if it's something like you're trying to treat a snake bite at home, just slap the poultice on. Hey, babe. Did you like the movie?
No.
You didn't? You're going to fall asleep right here? Yeah. Daddy's going to keep talking. You just sit right here, okay? Okay. Yeah. Daddy's talking. Yeah. If you've got something serious or you're dealing with like a staph infection, just go ahead and make the poultice. Don't try to cheap it out and be extra frugal. Make the dadgum poultice and take care of that. But if it's, you just have kind of a rash and it's just uncomfortable, but it's, not life-threatening, yeah, just use a salve, use a spray, use an oil, and then you don't have to use as much of your herb stocks up. I don't recommend minimizing you're trying to shrink down the area of the poultice because you risk it not working. I don't know about reusing the poultice twice. It depends. If it's like a mucilaginous herb, like some marshmallow root or something, you could probably get away with using it again, just re-wetting it, and it would probably bring out more of the slime, and you could lay it on the irritation again. if you were putting it back on yourself and not another person, because that just seems gross. If you had been using it on an infection or a toxin, I don't think I would reuse that poultice again, regardless of the plant, because it's you might have some contamination issues. Clay is not a plant, but it's very reusable though. It's really good for itchy bug bites too. I've used that when I was hiking, just clay off of the ground. Not the most hygienic, but very effective. Just slap it on the bug bites, and as it dries, it pulls the inflammation out, and then it just kind of crumbles off. But you could crumble it, and you could just kind of break it up, and you could reuse it again. I don't recommend trying to reclaim the poultice. Say if you were hypothetically using, well, let's say marshmallow, because you can use marshmallow topically and internally. So say if you use some marshmallow on a rash or something on your arm, and then you're done with the poultice. Well, hey, marshmallow is an edible herb. Maybe we could eat that, and then we would get that medicine back in our body too. We'd be getting it on the outside and on the inside. Okay, number one, that's gross, but gross doesn't always equal bad. But I really don't recommend that, because we're really running into some dangerous territory with contamination risks. If you had some bacteria there, an infection that it was fighting, that can be mixed in with the herb. Let's just not do that. Okay, let's go on to salves. I got a bunch of kids that need this. We have this, and we have one more after it, and then the video is done. So salves and oils, they're a pretty good option, really. They have a good shelf life. They usually don't have to be refrigerated, but if you do refrigerate it, it'll last a lot longer. Just when you open it, you can smell it. If the oil smells off, kind of rancid, it's done. You can make a pretty good sized batch and pour it into your, pretty little decorative tins, because we all love those. And any of them that you're not going to use right away, put them in the freezer. They'll last a long time. You can also mix essential oils into the salves and oils. That's a really good way to use them. But yeah, just have one in the fridge at a time. Use it as you need it. And when it runs out, or if it goes off, switch it out for the next one in the freezer. Okay, lastly, this has not been the best video I've ever done, but I'm taking it. I'm claiming it. I earned this video. Put a lot of work into just recording it. Lastly, sprays, which we had talked about. Sprays are just herbal teas that you put in a spray bottle. The shelf life is not so great, about a day. But if you'll pop it back in the fridge every time in between using it, it'll last, about 3 days. It's not a whole lot of fun getting sprayed by a really cold, refrigerated spray, but it'll make it last longer. So make smaller batches that are small enough that you'll use it within 3 days if you refrigerate it, or just 1 day if you're gonna not refrigerate it. That's it. We did it. We got through all of the things. Oh, yay! Give me 5. Okay. We're gonna say until next time. Say, keep your eyes out. Say, keep your eyes out.
Keep your eyes out.
For plants and zombies.
Plants and zombies.
Bye bye. Say bye bye.
Bye bye.